Good evening. Good evening. Nice to be back after a week away. Hopefully, everybody had a really good Thanksgiving and all of that. So, welcome tonight. I want to welcome everybody that is online. Grateful for your time and attention and being here. So, got some announcements that I want to lay out before we jump into our topic and our prayer time. So, for those of you that are in-house and those of you that are watching online but might be in-house on Sunday, make sure that you pick up a Christmas Eve invite card. We've got them scattered all over Building A here, and just give them to people, your neighbors, your friends, co-workers, and just invite them to our Christmas Eve service, of course, on Wednesday, Christmas Eve. So 3 weeks from tonight will not be Bible study. It will be Christmas Eve. And so make sure that you're here for that. I believe everything starts at 6 o'clock, and it's going to be a great evening. We got a lot of fun stuff planned that evening, so make sure you're here for that. Also, we want to say, if you want to say Merry Christmas to someone here at the church, we have our Christmas card box out in the lobby. And so if you want to make Christmas cards, put their names on it and then just alphabetical, for their last name, put it in the Christmas card box, and then everybody every week goes through and looks at the box to see if they got a card or anything like that. And so make sure that you do that. Ladies that are involved in the Thursday Bible study, you're only going to have one meeting this month. It's going to be on December 18th. So please make note of that. And then the 21st is going to be our Home for Christmas party, and this is going to be a lot of fun. If maybe you saw Michael's video, we're going to be talking a little bit more about it each week and things like that. And on Christmas Eve, thinking of Christmas Eve, we do cookies. All right, we have Christmas cookies, hot chocolate, coffee. If you would like to sign up, we like the homemade cookies, and so if you would like to make cookies, or if you would like to buy from store but not tell anybody that you bought from a store, that's fine too. Okay, we won't say no to that. But we're going to have tables set outside with cookies all over it. So the more cookies we have, the better. Okay, and so that's going to be for Christmas Eve. So if you want to sign up for that, give us kind of an idea of what to expect. That will be appreciated. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go to the Lord in prayer. I do want to let our church family know that Ed Albers passed away this past Sunday evening. He was, if you knew Ed, just a great guy, but he's home with the Lord. We are encouraged by that and grateful for that. But his wife Marie and the family, please lift them up in your prayers. They were married 56 years, and that's hard to say goodbye. So make sure that you keep Marie, especially in your prayers for that. Okay? Well, let's ask God to bless our time, and we'll go from there. Heavenly Father, thankful for the opportunity to be here tonight. Just pray your blessing over our evening. Heavenly Father, that you will speak through the lesson. Lord, that we may come to know you more. We may come to know our roles better as well. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so the Bible contains all kinds of different forms of literature, and one of the more popular forms is what's known as wisdom literature. So you have books like Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. That is known as Hebrew wisdom literature. And it does more than just offer wise advice on the human quest for knowledge, all right, or intimacy or creation rules and things like that. But these I forgot to mention Job. Job is also wisdom literature. But these books also, they address the challenges that we as humans face, even thousands of years removed from their original writing. And they deal with all different kinds of aspects of life, the good, the bad, and the in-between, all right? And no book about what it means to be human would actually be complete if we didn't look into these wisdom literatures more deeply. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take a look at wisdom literature. We're going to address the question, why do people suffer? All right. Why do Ecclesiastes and Job contribute to this question? How do they contribute to the issue of human suffering? And we're going to frame the session tonight not with answers, all right? Because ultimately, it's very difficult to come up with answers because we don't have all knowledge. Only one being does, and that'd be God. But we're going to frame it through the session. We're going to frame it through the lens of wisdom. All right, so that's what we're going to take a look at. So, Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verses 8 through 11. Now, Ecclesiastes is known by many to be a depressing book. And often that's because, and we're going to get into this a little bit more, of how a particular word is translated. Tonight, translation's a little bit murky and doesn't necessarily have the same connotation as what you and I often think. So, Solomon writes the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, remember Solomon's claim to fame that he was what? Okay, he was wise. All right, he was the wisest individual of his time. Okay, not the wisest person ever. That goes to Jesus himself, but he was gifted wisdom. All right, he was gifted wisdom directly by God. And so Ecclesiastes is part of his dispensing of the wisdom that he gains. One of the things that Solomon was very good at was people watching. Any people watchers out there? I love people watching. All right, now I don't sit and do it. I'm too active for that. But I like to observe people and their behaviors. I've always been wired that way. All right, if I go any place with a crowd, Disney, the airport, the mall. Okay, remember back in the 80s, we used to go hang out at the mall, all right, and things like that. I would girl watch, but I was also people watching, all right? What's that? Girls are people. They are, absolutely. So, but I've always been kind of wired that way. Well, Solomon was a people watcher. He had 700 wives. He also was a girl watcher. But he took a look at people interacting and living and brought forth all this wisdom from that. And he compiles it in this book that we call Ecclesiastes. And in chapter 1, starting verse 8, it says this: all things are wearisome, more than anyone can say. The eye is not satisfied by seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. In other words, we always want what? More, okay? All things are wearisome. In other words, they tire us out, don't they? What has been is what will be. And what has been done is what will be done. And this is the part that's so true. There is nothing new under the sun. Things get repackaged and they look different until you actually open the package and you're like, we've been here before, all right? We've been here before. We've seen this before. Can one say anything? Look, this is new. It has already existed in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of those who came before. We're going to talk a little bit about this later, all right? Because this is so important for us to remember. And of those who will come after, there will also be no remembrance by those who follow them. So, how many of you know the name of your great-grandparents? Anybody? A couple of you. Wow, more than I expected. Yeah. Do you think that your great-grandchildren are going to know your name? Probably not. Okay? Probably not. Unless they're interested in that kind of thing. That's an area of interest. But I'm adopted. I don't have any of that information. So I have no clue. All right? For some people, this is a distressing issue. Right? For other people, this is a fact of life. And so here's where we're going tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about this issue as we view wisdom literature about suffering. Why do we suffer? We're going to take a look at wisdom literature's approach to the issue of suffering. We're going to do that through the lens of Ecclesiastes and Job. And what I hope we learn to discover is how to live joyfully within the limits of these things. All right? So to do that, we need to take a look at the human experience. So in the book of Ecclesiastes, you have this character who is Solomon, who's called the teacher, okay? Or in Hebrew, Kohelet. Did I say that right, Kohelet? Or, all right, starts with a Q. So I'm going to go with that. And this teacher has tried everything and comes to a conclusion that life is, anybody know? Life is what? Meaningless. Bad translation, because that's not what the Hebrew says, but that's often what we in English ascribe to, and then we kind of teach that, all right? The Hebrew word that the teacher ends up using is a word called havel. And it is, a havel is a vapor or a mist. And the idea behind vapor and mist is that all of life and everything else in it is what? It's fleeting. It's elusive. So I have had the privilege of being on Pikes Peak in a cloud. I mean, it was awesome. Okay? Very cool. And if you want to know what a cloud feels like, it feels like nothing but moisture against your face. That's literally it. All right? It's less impressive than what it sounds like. But you know how clouds look very physical and like a big old cotton ball, all right? But really, when you're in the midst of a cloud, you can't grab it. There is nothing to grab a hold of. You can do this and get some moisture on your hand, but outside of that, that's it. Why? Because clouds are made up of moisture for the most part. And so trying to grab it becomes futile, all right? You can't do it. Well, this word havel, what Solomon is trying to do is not to say that everything in life is meaningless and without purpose, because that's problematic, especially when you come to the cross, all right? That's not what he's trying to say. What he's trying to say is everything is like a mist. It's elusive, it's fleeting, it is temporary. Now, most of us have already discovered that, haven't we? There are things in life that we've, just had to have that end up in the garbage bin, or they get destroyed, or they get stolen, or something like that. We don't have them anymore. So, part of our human experience is coming to understand this havel way of looking at things, all right? Our work, for instance. Our work is real, okay? We can do some amazing things with our hands and our minds and our mouths and our ears and all of that. But it's also limited. It's also limited. And here's a truth that many people towards the top of life would do well to remember. None of us is indispensable. We're not indispensable, okay? We are not God's greatest gift to whatever the gift is. All of us have an expiration date. All of us get to make a contribution in the time that we're allotted. However, we're also not indispensable. Somebody is eventually going to replace you. Even if you originate an idea, and Einstein originated some unbelievable ideas, but guess what? People today are doing what? They are building upon his ideas, right? So instead of striving endlessly for what we don't yet have, what we have to learn to do, and what wisdom literature is trying to teach us in our human experience, is learn to enjoy the gifts that God is giving us. So here's the reality. Everybody in life will at some point suffer, become disillusioned, and has limitations, right? Doesn't matter who you are. We will all suffer somehow, some way, at some level. Some will suffer much more greatly than others, but everyone will suffer. We will all be disillusioned by something or by someone. It's going to happen. And we will all discover our limitations. Add to that, the vast majority of people long for meaning and purpose in their lives. They want their life to count for something, at the very least, while they exist. It's part of what drives us as humans. It's part of what makes great athletes those great athletes. It's part of what makes great minds be those great minds. It's this drive for meaning and for purpose and for creating. Well, wisdom literature speaks to these universal principles that all of us in life deal with. And so the teacher is laying this out by using this Havel approach to things. So Ecclesiastes talks about weariness. All right, we talked about that in chapter 1, verse 8. So he takes a sober look at human ambition, and he recognizes that our ambitions have their limits. We are, as I mentioned, dispensable people. All right? People die all the time, and the world keeps turning, even without their hard work. Right? Somebody said it this way: it's like lifting a bucket of water out of the ocean. It doesn't make any impact whatsoever. Right? Yeah, you have a bucket of water, and for whatever your reason for getting that bucket, it fulfills that particular purpose, but does it change the ocean? Not one bit. Not one bit. All right? The ocean just keeps doing what the ocean does. So, perhaps this is why, for many people, retirement, prolonged illnesses, disabilities, and things of that nature become very unsettling, because we feel like we are purposeless. All right? I have talked to many people as a pastor that are on the twilight years of their life, and their physical health does not allow them to do anything. And the vast majority of them have the same kind of attitude. I don't feel worthwhile. There's nothing I can contribute to. And that's kind of a natural response, but also it's missing a broader point. Does God still give us life to just sit and be miserable, or to enjoy the moments that we have? Well, I always try to encourage people, listen, if your mouth and your mind work, you can pray. So that's never wasted. That's never wasted. And so sometimes people end up feeling like that. And, you know, everybody's situation is different. I understand that. But I think of that individual that was born without arms or legs. You've seen him before. I think he's Australian. Amazing. He's not let that. In fact, I think he got married. You know, might have children. I don't remember the situation. But, you know, here's an individual that did not let that circumstance keep him from enjoying the life that he was given. And by the way, I think he's a Christian and has that as a worldview, which drives everything for him. So in addition to a dramatic shift in our daily routine and our social networks, new questions end up plaguing us. If the world can go on without me, if the world can go on without my work, why did I work in the first place? What's the point? I mean, think about Solomon. Here's Solomon, becomes the wisest individual of his time through supernatural means. God grants him unbelievable prosperity, influence. He was an incredible architect. And none of that stuff exists for us to view anymore. None of it. can't go to see the Hanging Gardens, or, that wasn't Solomon, but you can't go to the palace, the temple. You can't see any of this stuff anymore. Everything that he put so much time, effort into, is all that hard work. It's meaningless. It's a vapor. So oftentimes humans and the thing, well, what good does this do? And so the teacher's looking at this, he's people watching, and he begins to despair at his inability to kind of hang on to what he's achieved. And so, you know what he concludes with? He concludes with, stop working for what you don't have and start enjoying the journey that you're on. That's incredibly wise advice. Stop working for what you don't have and start enjoying the journey. If like you've hit that wall, you've done what you can, if we pour all of our energy into getting somewhere else, what do we often end up doing? We miss the moments that are right in front of us. How many people, and maybe you're one of them, you know people like that were so driven to be so successful that, in fact, their entire self-worth and self-esteem was built around this, that it cost them their marriage, it cost them relationships with their children, it cost them relationships with friends and different things like that, because they were so driven on this one object, and they get to the end of their life, and it's totally meaningless now. So I'm a Browns fan, obviously, and Bernie Kosar was a big hero of mine growing up. He was quarterback back in the 80s, and those of you that know, what's that? He beat you guys multiple times in your own house, I might add. But here's Bernie, this unique athlete, and all of this, and today he's sitting in a hospital, just got a liver transplant, hanging on to life. Here's a guy at the pinnacle, world-class athlete, made to the NFL. Injuries kind of derailed his career, and now he's on borrowed time. And all I have with that is to watch YouTube videos of previous successes. So we live in this in between. But you know what those videos do for me? I enjoy it, because it takes me back when I was younger. It takes me back to when they were actually more successful, and it's a lot of fun. All right. But so often people end up pouring themselves in trying to get that next step, that they miss what's actually around them in front. The Latin, what is seize the day? Carpe diem. Right? That's the idea. That's the principle behind it. Hey, seize the day. Enjoy what's right in front of you versus what isn't there yet. And so if you look at the book of Ecclesiastes as cynical, it's because either A, you misunderstand what's trying to be said, or B, somebody has completely mistaught the book. It's not meant to be a cynical look at life. It's meant to be a book of wisdom that teaches you to enjoy the things right around you in everything else, the suffering and the successes and everything in between. Don't spend your life yearning for what you don't have. Enjoy what you do. Enjoy where you are. I think I've done this only a few times in my life, but the one that stands out to me, I have two that stand out to me. You know how we tend to rush through things. At least that's me. That's my personality. All right. I'm like, I'm in the midst of something. I'm like, okay, what's next? What's next? And I have to purposely pump the brakes of my life. When I got married, the day of my wedding, I intentionally woke up that morning and I had to pump the brakes, to say, I need to enjoy every single moment of this day. Not just looking forward to the honeymoon, not just looking, all that. Enjoy that moment. The second was when Kyler was born. When Kyler was born, I forced myself Because listen, you only get your first child born one time, right? That's it. I have to seize that moment. And I had to be very intentional about that. And the way he was born was kind of like immediate. He was breech. And so like everything was kind of moving quick, but I'm like, you know what? I have got to enjoy every single step of this journey because it's never going to happen. I'm never going to go through this exact scenario again. Then I was there for the birth of my daughters, but I'd already been through it, right? Been there, done that kind of thing. So those were two that come to mind. Maybe you have similar ones that come to your mind where you had to intentionally say, you know what? I need to stop and appreciate what just happened. Now, when I graduated college, I was so ready to be done. I didn't even want to go to my own graduation. My mom forced me to. She's like, I have paid thousands of dollars. You're going to your graduation, I didn't care, I was ready to go on to the next thing, all right? So my college graduation to me wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big thing. Other people, man, you get conferred degrees and different things like that, and it's amazing. We need to learn to enjoy what we're in the midst of. And this is part of the message that's being said here. All things are wearisome. Ambition ends up wearing us down. Work is temporary, all right? Everything that we do is temporary. And here's the reality. At some point, all of us are going to be forgotten. We are going to be relegated to the dust bin of history. That is, for some people, it's depressing. For me, it's a fact of life. I don't look at it as depressing. When I go back to my hometown, I'll walk through the graveyard. Sometimes just go past my father's grave. But every time I go, here's one thing that I notice. I know more and more people there. I recognize names. I'm like, that was a teacher. That was a coach. That was a friend of my parents. That was, this, that was that. And I always say to myself, one day, you're going to be in a spot like that. And it's sobering to me. It just reorients me, right? I don't have a death wish. It just reorients me to be mindful of just enjoy the moment because we get so caught up in life sometimes. And in doing so, it becomes wearisome and a burden. Do you know people where life is wearisome and a burden to them? That shouldn't be, by the way, that like literally outside of, their circumstances do not dictate that life should be burdensome to them, but they act that way, right? And things like that. So Ecclesiastes 3, we come to the third chapter. Solomon says this, it's also the gift of God whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all of his efforts. It's a gift from God on high. Anytime you and I step back and go, wow, look at this. Look at what I've done. Not in a prideful manner, but in an accomplished manner. It's a gift from God to be able to step back and go, you know what? I had a good career. Wasn't perfect, but I had a good career. I did my best. I was able to contribute during my time, right? Now, as a pastor, here's what I understand. In a few years from now, when it's my turn to step back and the next person steps up, they're probably going to come in. You know what they're going to do? Change everything. And you know what? I'm perfectly fine with that. As long as it's biblical and honors Jesus, I don't care. I don't care. It's going to be what God calls them to do. And I want to make sure that I'm as supportive as possible with that. Because I know a lot of people, it's not true of them. They want to fight and cling and tooth and nail and hang on to what they've accomplished. And they fear anything that's outside of their control. All right? So I love that verse right there. In chapter 9, verses 7 through 10, it says this, go eat your bread with pleasure, and drink your wine with a cheerful heart. For God has already accepted your works. Let your clothes be white all the time, and never let oil be lacking on your head. All right, might have to translate that just a little bit. So there were no Tide Pods back during Solomon's day, all right? And so especially this was true of commoners. Clothing got dirty and you're hand washing and you can only get so much out, right, in water. Well, the whiter the garment typically meant the more successful or wealthy you were because you could afford those white garments, all right? That meant that you had a lot of clothes and different things like that. In other words, you were successful. And then all this idea, this oil be lacking on your head. Oil on a head meant anointed. You were set apart for something. So let your clothes be white all the time and never let oil be lacking on your head. Never let there be a moment where you don't feel that you have a specific cause or something to do. Enjoy life with the wife that you love all the days of your fleeting life, which has been given to you under the sun, all your fleeting days, for that is your portion in life and in your struggle under the sun. Whatever your hands find to do, do it with all of your strength, because there is no work, planning, knowledge, or wisdom in Sheol where you're going. So in Hebrew, Sheol is the grave, all right? Or it is the underworld, okay? There is no talk in the Old Testament about hell and, when you and I think about hell and fire and damnation and all of that, the only word that you see is this word Sheol. It means grave or abode of the dead, the underworld. Well, the idea here is when your body quits, all right, you're done. That you go to the grave, all right? You're not going to be building houses. You're not going to, be milking cows, things like that. So what the teacher's doing here is he's saying, don't give up on work. Whatever your hand finds you to do it to the best of your ability. But since you're all going to die at some point and eventually be forgotten, enjoy life along the way. For some people, that's like a blasphemous thought, isn't it? Workaholics, all right? People that, have you ever noticed people that do not vacation well? My father was not a good vacationer. He hated vacations because when he was vacationing, he wasn't making money. And because he wasn't making money, he couldn't pay the bills. And if you can't pay the bills, you know how that goes, right? That was how his mindset worked. For me, it takes me about 48 hours on vacation or when I'm outside of my environment, work environment, to begin to unplug. If I just have like 24 hours, that is not vacation. It's a brief rest, but it's not true vacation for me. How about for you? Are you like that at all? Do you know people that they cannot not work? It's always been an interesting phenomenon to me. People move to Florida, and within 3 months, they're bored to tears and they start working at Publix or someplace else, right? They may have been the big, yeah, I respect the heck out of people that get like, you know what, I'm retired and I can enjoy life. And that doesn't mean you don't serve the Lord on the side and things like that, but you're able to kind of rest, or you're able to take the time that you used to use to work and now you're applying it elsewhere. But there are a lot of people, they struggle with that. And so Ecclesiastes reminds us, hey, enjoy life along the way. It's not that our work doesn't matter, but what Solomon is trying to say is, hey, loosen the belt buckle, all right? It's okay to eat dessert every now and then. It's okay to enjoy life, the life that God has given you now and then. That's what people that are very diet conscious, like they, I have a family member had a quadruple bypass. And he was talking to the doctor. He said, what am I allowed to eat? And the doctor said to him, nothing with eyes. And so he was telling me this story. And I'm like, you can't even eat shrimp? And he's like, Todd, They have eyes like this. And I said, well, I guess I'd have whatever the number 8 of bypasses is, because like I would not go that far. Like I may not eat as much hamburger as I used to, but I wouldn't stop eating hamburger. You know, it's kind of like the story of the 88-year-old that's told by the doctor who smoked all their life, you know, you might want to give up smoking. Really? You know? So this is an important truth that the teacher's trying to say. Do what you love what you do. The world does not depend on your success. Rest in that fact, all right? Also, rest in the fact life isn't always going to make sense. It's going to feel sometimes like you're going round and round, you're not making any progress, or you're going to see people that become highly successful and you're like, they don't deserve that kind of success. But they get that lucky break, all right? They win the lottery. Don't panic. As meaningless as it seems, God hasn't stopped ruling the world. And that is such a great thing. As Christians, you and I, we have to remember, no matter what is going on geopolitically, no matter what is going on globally, God is still on his throne. And he's still in control. And somehow, some way, as only God can do, he will work it out. And in the meantime, what he wants from us is to work, to love, to celebrate, and honor him. Right? Nobody needs to be more pious than God. How many of you watched The Chosen? Yeah. So I've only watched a couple seasons. I liked it. I thought it was pretty well done. And you know, you have to go into shows like that, understanding they take liberties with the passages and dramatizing that. But I absolutely love how they've portrayed Jesus. I've never watched the Jesus character in these other shows be happy and smile and joke around and play around. Jesus must have been like that because he lived out the human experience. We have this dapper view of Jesus, this pious view of Jesus, that Jesus was no fun, that Jesus was always serious, and you know, all this. And that is probably not accurate whatsoever. But that's in our mind's eye, isn't it? And there are some religious people that get like that and they think, oh my goodness, I'm having fun, I better stop. And they forget who invented fun. God did. God did. So learn to enjoy his gifts. So when it comes to Ecclesiastes, it's not a depressing book. It just takes a realistic view of life. It gives you a sober realism. Realizing that I'm going to eventually die frees me from stop obsessing about my work and enjoying it for my own sake. If I can live with a properly sized view of my own importance in the grand scheme of things, all right, which is highly minuscule, then turning in my keys or not being quite as perfect sometimes as I want to be is okay. Because, and here's the thing, and some of us need to understand this, your identity is not wrapped up in what you do. You know people that it just seems like, and they probably can't verbalize this. Most of them probably don't recognize it in themselves. But they are so driven because that's where their self-esteem comes from. If I'm not producing, if I'm not creating, then there's something wrong with me. We have been going through this series talking about imaging God. My identity is rooted in my status as an imager of God, not in what I produce or don't produce. And so is yours. So the fulfillment that we get in life is leaning into how God wired me and how that can be experienced without a paycheck. If it was possible, I would do this job without taking pay. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy what I do. Now, there's aspects of the day-to-day that I'd be like, let somebody else deal with that. But when it comes to teaching or when it comes to preaching even when it comes to being by somebody's side that's hurting or something like that. I'm wired that way. I enjoy that part of ministry. I don't need to get paid for it. Well, yeah, I do need to get paid for it, but I don't need internally to get paid for it. All right. I just want to represent God as best I can. So, like I mentioned, none of us is indispensable. Okay. The church is not Sebastian Christian Church of Todd Thomas. All right. It's not. I don't, the other day somebody asked me, Pastor Todd, or what do you want to be called? I'm like, just Todd's fine. If you have to do titles, that's fine. I respect that, but I don't need it. No, I don't have a special parking spot. Um, you know, it's just part of that's how I'm wired. But I also realize, hey, it's all equal footing at the cross. This becomes good news for people because they're not caught up in all this. So how do we enjoy the journey? Eat and drink. Okay. Now, I not necessarily always eating and always drinking. That can become problematic. But just understanding, celebrating is a gift of God. When you do something that you're really enjoying. When people boycott things, I'm not saying that all boycotts are wrong. They're not. But sometimes I feel like people take boycotts way, way, way too far. And you can push back, and that's fine. This is my opinion. I'm the one teaching, so I get to express it. Sometimes boycotts are good. They can be healthy. But boycotts can also become very problematic. The point of the boycott is to say, I don't agree with what you're doing, either with my money or the direction you're going or whatever, so I'm going to withhold, right? Well, the problem with that is we become very selective in that. And so, for instance, during the last probably 10 years, Disney, a lot of people just boycott Disney. And if you do that, that's fine. It's not a problem. All right. But you have those different reasons. But I'm curious, do you also boycott Anheuser-Busch? Do you also boycott these corporations that have these sub-corporations that are doing things that you don't agree with? You see what I'm saying? All right. How far does that boycott go? To the point where now you get so wrapped up, you can't enjoy anything. Anything. Right? Now, I'm not saying don't take a stand on something. But I've had people, on one hand, they take a stand against, say, a Disney or a corporation like that. And on the other hand, they're stealing cable. I'm like, hey, there's a disconnect here, Sometimes learn to enjoy the life that's in front of you, as long as it's not dishonoring God and you're not going off the reservation. Stop striving to the point that your entire self-worth becomes wrapped up in that striving for that next thing, that next thing, that next big thing. Learn to enjoy the little gifts that God sprinkles in along the way. This is me, and again, I don't know if God does this or not. When Jim and I, when we go diving, if we go down to Blue Heron Bridge, there are certain times when the place is packed. Like finding a parking spot is almost supernatural. And when one opens up and it's close to the area we want to be, I always, God, thanks for this spot opening. Now, did God open that spot? I don't know. Maybe the person had a bar mitzvah to go to. I don't have any idea. I'm just grateful the spot opened up. I want to enjoy that simple, I call them little blessings. And I try to teach my kids that as well. Hey, listen, every day there's these little blessings that come into our lives. And if we're not paying any attention, we're going to miss out on these little blessings. Work, but don't worship work. Don't make an idol out of work. And so this is part of the message here of this is just part of the message here of Ecclesiastes. Is life meaningless? I've already talked about Havel being a vapor. It's not, the word itself is not implying meaningless. It's just mean you can't, it's a mist. You can't describe it. It's vaporous. All right. It's got an ungrasped kind of meaning to it, that, hey, life is life. It is what it is. And so when we call it meaningless, we're really missing the point. When we're constantly looking ahead, guess what we're doing? We're stealing the joy that's right in front of us or right next to us. And listen, you and I, we have all done this, haven't we? We've all done this. For those of us that have had children, and for 18 years, you do the parent thing. And you're like, man, I can't wait till the parent thing is done. And then the parent thing gets done and the child leaves. And you're like, I would do anything to get my child back. Isn't that weird? It's really weird. But we do that. We're like, man, I cannot wait till this kid graduates and can get into the workforce and all of that. And then they actually do it. And you're like, oh my goodness, they're not there. Or that dog that annoys you, that's running around your house like a chicken with its head cut off all the time. All right? Man, I hate this dog. And the dog's gone, and you come home, and nobody's there to greet you. That was hard for me when I lost my first dog. The first day after that, walking in the house and Princess not running up to me was really sobering. That was tough. And here was a dog that I loved to death, drove me crazy, but still loved her. Enjoy what's here, what's right in the moment. Enjoy what we got. Enjoy what we got. And looking at work as a gift. All right, what do we do when life isn't fair? So the Bible does not hold back on anything. It doesn't lie to us. It doesn't rose color everything, all right? It's not a self-help book. The Bible paints a stunning vision of God's plan to restore all things. All right? And even in our own lives, there are times when we get glimpses of this restoration. I call them little victories. You ever have a little victory in your life where maybe you used to, you were just an angry individual and you allow God to work on you over the time and you begin to see, wow, I'm not as angry as I used to be. I don't hold the same kind of grudge that I used to hold. I'm learning to let go of that. That's part of the restoration process, all right? Most of the time, most of us, we don't live in the extremes. We live in the messy middle. We live in the middle between God's good creation this new creation to come. And in God's good creation, bad things still happen because it's fallen. And we're waiting for this new creation to come. And we get reminding glimpses of it. When Ed passed away the other day, I thanked the Lord that he was a godly man and he's in the arms of Jesus. And I have no doubt that I'm going to see him again. But that's to come. That's to come. And we're in the in-between. So when as humans, we learn to live in this fractured relationship between physical limitations and the disappointments that come with living in a world that's just marred by sin and all that. But what wisdom literature does is it helps us. It helps us in two key ways. All right? It helps us honor our struggle. All right? So the book of Job is an incredibly profound and powerful book. Job is a righteous individual. Now, you and I read that and we're like, okay, Job's perfect. No, Job's not perfect, all right? He's human just like the rest of us, okay? He has his ups, he has his downs, he has his good days, he has his bad days. But he's righteous in this. His unwavering loyalty is with Yahweh. That's what that word righteous means. It means that your unwavering loyalty and allegiance is with God, the only true God. So we find that Job is righteous. We also find out that Job is suffering without any apparent cause. That Job is able, and Job's friends and even his wife are able to see. So Job loses, he's wealthy, he loses his wealth. Big family, loses all of his family. All right? Loses his health. And then he has friends that are trying to speak into his life, but are so off base on what they're talking about that they're actually making the situation worse. Well, this whole book of Job talks about honoring the struggle that we're in. God's hard on Job's judgmental friends. He calls them out like, you guys just need to stop because you're just spouting off things that you don't know of, right? He doesn't condemn Job. Job asks some questions, doesn't condemn Job. He allows Job to wrestle because human suffering provokes a wrestling with life. Why am I going through this? What's the purpose of this? And that's not wrong. That's okay. So the book of Job invites us into these kind of deep questions. But the second part of this book is inviting us to do something. It's to trust God's wisdom even though we cannot see any purpose in our suffering. When there is nothing to explain what's happened. Now, down through the years, scholars have tried to say that Job is a fictionalized character that kind of is a universal picture of suffering and things like that. I disagree. I think Job was a real nonfiction individual. I believe he existed, and I believe that his story went exactly as God, or as the Bible reveals it. And the reason for the story of Job is God knew that this story was going to be universal to the human experience, and he would use this to be a blessing to other people who would be wise enough to hear the story and mind the truths that are inside of it. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the story of Job, so Job goes through the suffering, and his friends are like, Job, you've done something. He's like, I haven't done anything. All right. Which, by the way, how often do we think, well, God must be mad or upset at me because I'm doing this or I'm going through this? That's simply not true. All right? That's not always true. You can't always say, I cringe sometimes when I hear people go, well, God must be upset at me. No, he's not upset at you, right? Now, does God use situations to correct us? Sure he does. Sure he does. Can God purposely put something? Sure, he can do that. Does he always do that? I don't think so. I don't think that's typically how he operates. He knows how all of us respond, all right? So Job's friends, they're off base. They go through these discourses. They go through these conversations, these arguments, these back and forth. Job then, is pondering all this kind of stuff. And then finally, at the end of the book, God shows up. God puts Job and his friends in their place. And then he blesses Job more the second time than he did the first time. Doubles everything, with the exception, Job has the same number of kids that he had the first time. Here's what's not mentioned in the book, and I don't normally hear taught or preached on. And the reality is this. Yep, God blesses Job even more than he did the first time and gives him new children, but he never removes the memory of his previous children. Job has to spend the rest of his life mourning the loss of his first children. Moms, you understand that. How do you get that out of your head? So while it sounds like a happy ending, it's not all happy. Not all happy. And here's Job caught up in the midst of this cosmic battle that he has no idea what's going on behind the scenes. And the truth should be, we don't always know what's going on behind the scenes. The accusation that Satan lays out to God is you keep blessing Job, so he just keeps loving you. Does Job love God for who God is, or because God gives him stuff? That's the heart of the argument that Satan has, and that's where they go. And Job's cry is, why have you made me your target? Sometimes we feel like that, don't we, when things are happening to me? Kind of feel like we're walking around with a target on our back. That's an honest lament. God doesn't say that's wrong. He doesn't lambaste Job for that. That's an honest way of looking at things. But God responds this way. Okay, he questions. Where were you, Job? Do you understand everything? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Go ahead. Tell me how I did it, Job. What's he trying to do with Job there? He's trying to get him to see there are bigger things going on than Job understands. He's trying to get Job to understand you have a very limited perspective. Is that not true of all of us? Everything that happens to us in life, whether it is purposeful or we're caught up in it, we are only seeing from a particular perspective. You got God at 30,000 feet, and here's us walking down a street that's about to turn, and we have no idea what's around the corner. God does, because he already sees everything. He's above it. He's outside of it. And so what the book of Job is trying to do is it's an invitation to trust God in everything, the good, the bad, and this messy middle, right? Where you and I are caught up between living in creation as it is now and the new creation that Jesus has promised us, with imagery like streets of gold, pearly gates, and no more tears and sickness. And these are all images of a perfected life. The book of Job doesn't answer the question of why do humans suffer. Suffering is unclear. I think, and I'm not very smart, so I could be way off base here, suffering is unclear in the book of Job because not all suffering is the same. I mean, think about it. There are things you and I do to ourselves that cause suffering, right? There are other times when we're caught up in the shrapnel of other people's decisions and we suffer because of that. And there are other times when something just randomly happens. Doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason to it. Suffering becomes unclear. But Job teaches us to learn to trust God's wisdom through all of that. All right, I got to really get going here. So we got mortality and wisdom. We're finite individuals with meaning and purpose. And wisdom literature is trying to give us this clarity of life. So Psalm 90, verse 12. Here's how you and I catch perspective on life. The psalmist asked God, teach us to number our days carefully, so that we may develop wisdom in our hearts. Okay? How many of us wish that we were 21 years old again, but have the wisdom we do now? I'd sign up in a heartbeat, right? Right? Wisdom is wasted on the young, no, youth is wasted on the young, right? Yeah, this idea, but you know what? Everybody and everything has a shelf life. We don't like to think this way, but we must. Scripture tells us to do it because it's a wise thing to do, right? Living within your limits, all right? Can't do it all, that's okay. Learn to live in community with other people. Don't be one of those take your ball and go home kind of people. We weren't made that way. People that isolate, by the way, that's part of the fall. That's not part of God's plan. Okay? I'm not saying it's sin. I'm just saying it's part of the fall. It's less than perfect. Learn to enjoy the day that God has given you. So, in your own life, where is God inviting you to kind of just slow down? Where do you need to pump the brakes? And remember, life is a vapor, but full of God. So God is in everything. He's in messy middle and the great and the not so great. He's there. We'll give him credit for it. And we'll stop there for tonight. So thank you so much for next week.